We live?
Yes.
Hello and welcome to the Mostly Star Wars podcast. I am your host, Quinton, joined by my fellow co-hosts this afternoon, Tyler.
How's it going, everyone? I left it for you, Josiah.
Our other host, Josiah.
Hello there.
Well, today we're going to be talking about Rogue One. It's many of our opinions that is the best Star Wars film from the Disney era. At least that's my opinion. And we're looking forward to hanging out, seeing what you guys think, and talking some Star Wars.
So, okay, keep going. I'm getting some frame drops, and I don't know why.
Uh-oh. Okay. So this movie, at least at the time, started off a little different than any other Star Wars movie of all time. We don't get the crawl. But this movie really is just the story of the crawl from A New Hope. So, it's kind of interesting that we can get an entire movie out of just that backstory written for the start of a movie.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another cool thing with this movie is there's usually a decent chunk of time. Sometimes it's years. Sometimes it's, like a month or something like that. But at least there's a decent chunk of time where you're kind of wondering, how did we get from this place to this place? How did we get from, the characters in the story being one way to them now being another way, right? And don't get me off on that tangent, but on this one, it's amazing because it ends exactly where A New Hope starts. So to me, I think that makes it unique and really cool.
Yeah, it just ends off right where it picks. And it always makes me want to just go straight into A New Hope when I finish the movie.
Totally.
It's just right there.
Yeah.
Fits perfectly.
Right at the.
I kind of liked that opening with the with Krennic's shuttle amongst the asteroid, the rings of the planet. It kind of gives you an idea of speed, how fast they're traveling with the asteroids being there. But it also felt really kind of like, it felt like, I want to say like 1980s kind of sci-fi feel to it.
Yeah.
But obviously, it looked really good being much more modern technology used to make it. But it kind of gave that kind of feel to it.
Yeah, for sure. And then we also didn't get the ship right at the beginning, which is kind of like a Star Wars staple. You're talking about the crawl, but that's another thing too. And it's kind of funny because of the way that the light was on the rings that you were talking about. It almost made it seem like we were going to get that, very familiar, iconic, across the the bow of the ship or something like that. And then it kind of backs out so you can see that it's actually the rings of the planet.
Yeah, that is really cool. That's the cinematography right at the start there, and the movie, like, it starts off and it says, "All right, this is going to be a ride. This isn't going to be just a normal Star Wars," because that really loud burp, like, okay, the movie's starting. Like, so you're sitting there first time, you're like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
And you get that big jump, and you're just like, "What is happening here?" But it's like, all right, this movie's gonna be, it's gonna move. It's gonna be a war movie. It's not just gonna be. And I like kind of how you brought out there isn't a crawl, but there's a prologue, which is basically the crawl. The whole first scene where Krennic goes to pick up Galen and Lyra and Jin, and when she's young, that basically is the crawl.
Yeah, they just filmed it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
I like that. Well, when they're approaching that planet, and you can see the rings from the planet, that would be so cool to see. Like, realistically, like, to stand on a planet that has rings like that and to be able to see them from the planet.
Right.
That would be like crazy weird.
Yeah, I never even thought about it until you just brought it up. But that is really cool. Like that it kind of had that, prologue to the movie. It gave you like, kind of like somewhere to base, what is going to happen later along in the movie. And it was a cool idea because usually you meet a character and then you slowly, have character development. Either you're going to, love the character, aspire to be the character or hate the character,
Hmm.
however it's going to be, but you kind of learn that across the movie. Whereas this one, they gave you the backstory. So before you really, start diving into you know, their character, some 10, 20, 10, 15 years later, you already have like a starting off point of caring about this family, right? Which actually makes it
Mhm.
even more epic, I think, like once you actually get into it, because then you can start to understand the feelings of Jen and Saw, and like that, the whole dynamic of their relationship. I think it's like is like compounded by the fact that you understood the kind of inception of someone having like could possibly be like a beautiful normal life into getting thrust into the middle of a war.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's real good because if you've read the book Catalyst,
Mm-hmm.
basically it's the early days of the Empire, or even a little bit before, where Krennic was already working on the Death Star. And spoilers for the book, but basically the gist of it is that Galen figures out what they're building and wants to escape, and they are friends. They had met Saw Gerrera along sometime in the book along the way, and they use him. He smuggles them away from Krennic and everything, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's where they know Saw Gerrera, and and he comes and saves Jin out of the hole, and then that's the prologue. That's the crawl, and then the next
Mhm.
thing you see her in a prison transport.
I know, that is
Well,
like
I really
so
like
so amazing.
that. There's the line when Krennic and uh Orson, not what? Okay, I just lost it. Jin's dad's name. Oh
Galen.
my gosh,
Galen.
Galen. Okay, when they're talking at the after they walk a whole kilometer in uh
Yeah.
from the ship. That one's for Bruce. They're a whole kilometer in, and uh and they talk about, he said we're this close to provide to, and he always says providing peace and security to the galaxy, like he's doing a
Mm-hmm.
service. This is something great he's doing for people, and Galen's response of, "I think you're confusing peace with terror." That's just
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly the what the Empire is. The people thinking that they're providing peace and security, but they're really just providing terror.
Mm-hmm.
Or peace
Yeah.
through terror.
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
not peace, though. Peace through
Yeah.
terror is not peace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because what did he say? I was trying to think of what it was, so you might have actually specifically said it. But what did he like? It ever we have to start somewhere or something? Is that
Yes, yes.
yeah, something like that?
He's like, you're confusing peace with terror, and then Krennic replies, "Well, you got to start somewhere."
Yeah,
But
and
that's not
it's
really a
true.
good place to start.
Yeah, it for 100%, and it's like it's totally true though, because that's basically what we've seen through all of Star Wars. Especially through the different trilogy sagas, is many times the main characters of the story feel like you need to do something that is against their conscience to be able to get to a place of peace. We've seen it over and over a time, and then what ends up happening is the exact opposite. They never get to that peaceful state. So.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and then when he tries to take him back, is another great line when she says, he said, "Well, you'll live happily," and she goes, "As hostages," and Krennic says, "No, as heroes of the Empire.
Yeah.
The way he says
Mhm.
that line is just bone chilling. That
Mhm.
they're
Well,
it even makes you think of that episode of The Mandalorian season 2, where they got to get the location for Grogu, and uh, Mayfield shoots the guy who's saluting, heroes of the Empire.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I also think it's a funny part of like that intro, but you know, basically they had this planned out. Both Galen and Lyra knew what they needed to do. Jin knew what she needed to do, and they conversed with Saw right before it happened, so he knew his role in all this. And then all of a sudden, Lyra doesn't listen to the plan, goes rogue. And then Jen does the same thing. It's just kind of funny, like they had been preparing for this moment. They knew exactly what to do, and then everything just blew up at the end.
I think it was yeah, it's kind of funny because she's like all sneaking up and then she runs at him from like 100 feet away or something. Like you're really hiding. And I like
Man.
I think it's great because Krennic's like, oh look, Lyra back from the dead. Like he's totally
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah, I love that.
Not at
That
all.
was so amazing. And then since you guys mentioned it, we have the once again like the epic, walking towards each other that is in so many Star Wars movies. But that people always say like, why did they have the ship so far away?
Yeah,
For like that epic
Quinton said a
walking up to
kilometer
each
away.
other scene. But like it is true though, because like cinematically it looks so awesome, like seeing them coming.
Oh yeah.
And then when they flip around to the other side and you're seeing them walk up to like his homestead, oh man, it's so amazing. It's worth it for the kind of strange moment that they
The
put the ship so
cinematography.
far
Yeah,
away.
it's like the Empire knew they were being filmed, because
Yeah.
the shuttle makes this big
Gotta make
sweeping turn.
dramatic
It
entrance.
flies right over the homestead, big sweeping turn to go land a kilometer away, and that
And
shuttle
then
looks
when
menacing.
and then when Krennic is walking up, like that has that perfect breeze that's like blowing his cape.
The white cape surrounded by the black Death Troopers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nothing that
Yeah.
I mean, he does look menacing. That's what he's trying to. He's just trying to uh, send out his presence. Like, look at it, I'm going to march all the way to you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And shout out in the chat real quick. So editor says, I wonder how much Galen got paid to make the Death Star. That actually is a kind of interesting question when you think about it, because he was going willing, quote unquote, unwillingly, but kind of willingly, and somewhere along the line it changed, right? But it is kind of hard to say, because his immediate response is as hostages, which obviously wouldn't be paid anything, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's kind of hard to say. I don't know if he got paid anything, or if they're basically like, you do it or die.
I mean, if you think about it, like in his role, if he had been doing it willingly, I wouldn't say that he would necessarily be rich, but definitely an elevated status, be very comfortable, could afford pretty much probably anything he really wanted or needed. Like he wouldn't
Right.
be struggling in any means,
Mm-hmm.
especially if he was there willingly. Now, when he wasn't willingly, it probably didn't matter. Like you said, he confined himself to his room, he confined himself to his work diligently for the whole time. And so he probably didn't have lots of like, ooh, I want to go buy a new starship. There's a new Nubian J type from Naboo that I've got my eye
That's
on.
what I was just thinking.
Like
that's
not what he was thinking of.
In
He
one
was,
starfighter.
yeah,
Oh,
that's not what
man.
was on his mind. And so, I mean, I kind of doubt he really had much of a, how much money am I making salary talk with his manager, right?
I kind of
Yeah, I
doubt
think
he
what you
got
said,
much time
it's
off
probably
of
more.
Edu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I bet it was probably more realistically, like you said, it was more a status thing. Because if you also notice, like
Mhm.
in later in the movie, which we'll get to, but he was wearing which one, it's very convenient because they're super far away and like trying to snipe him, but like he was wearing a different color uniform, right? So
Yeah,
I
he
feel
was
like
the
it was
lead
probably more
engineer.
right. So it's like just seeing him, everybody knew like, oh, he's the boss or whatever it was. Maybe it
Well,
wasn't necessarily like a financial thing.
isn't it like it's Tarkin who mentions that the uh, the cargo pilot was dispatched from Edu, Galen Urso's installation. So like that entire place was
Yes.
under his control. He was running
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's definitely a high status thing. I think of it like maybe governors, like Captain Price in Rebels,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and stuff like that. That kind of status. Not necessarily having a lot of money, but you have a lot of status. And in a
Yeah.
authoritarian empire like this, that's what that translates into wealth on its own,
Yeah,
without
for sure.
necessarily having a salary.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think one things I really like about this movie is because it's very much like a Star Wars movie in the fact that it's an adventure movie, and it's about the whole growing up and learning the right decisions. And that's basically what Jin does throughout the movie, because at first she's just reluctant to help. She's like, I mean, she tells Saw, he does like, you don't care about the cause. You can see the Empire's flag burn, or
Mm-hmm.
and
And you
she's
see
like,
the Empire's flag rain across the galaxy.
yeah, rain across the galaxy. And then she's like, it's not a problem if you don't look up. So her whole
Right.
attitude is kind of like, throughout this movie, you can kind of see how it changes. And she has the growing up and learning to make the proper decisions like you get throughout all Star Wars. That's what A New Hope is.
Yeah.
That's what it is for Luke. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people relate so much to this movie being the best Disney movie, because it almost feels like one of the most Star Wars movies. Now, we've had lots of discussions. I
Mm-hmm.
love all the other Disney movies that they've made, but this movie, it is special.
Yeah. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can see it in, like you can't base everything off of like, the critics or, people's reviews because, a lot of times it's like mob mentality, right? People saying, oh,
Hmm.
this is a bad movie. Everyone's going to jump on and say it's bad, right? But
Yep.
like you can see it in like Rotten Tomatoes and all the different like reviews both from the audience and the critics that this was just a well rated movie, and I totally agree with them. I agree this is one of like the
Mm-hmm.
greatest movies, especially as a standalone. They did an amazing job with this movie. And I think just touching real quick on what you were saying about Jen and kind of like her story and how how she viewed her life based on what happened to her. And I'm super excited for Andor because basically Cassian has, from what we understand, a very similar situation happened to him at a young age at 6 years old, very similar to Jin's story. And he did some, and he said it himself. The difference is I'm trying to do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And so I think that was really cool for them to meet and for them to have kind of similar stories, but basically have different paths of handling that emotional baggage, that emotional damage that they went through. And so it was really cool for them to kind of get together and basically balance each other out almost, because obviously, like we're going to get into it real quick, but, Cassian's like, almost like, to a
Too
fault.
extreme.
Yeah, too extreme, right? And then she's like to the extreme the other way. So they kind of almost balance each other out, which is cool.
And this is definitely a bit of a darker, more grown up movie, and you can kind of tell from
Mm-hmm.
the tone right away. Right after the prologue, you get the scene of Cassian getting the information from uh, his fellow rebel that's uh, on that really cool asteroid that's like bound together and kind of floating in space.
Yeah.
Really got me feeling like Port of Nowhere vibes from Guardians, kind of in that. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was pretty cool looking. And then it's so dark.
See, I was thinking The Expanse.
That's
Yeah, I
exactly
mean,
what I was thinking. I was thinking
okay,
Expanse.
yeah, that makes sense. In the belt, right?
yeah.
Uh-huh.
But then uh, they get caught by those stormtroopers, right? And they can't just give them their IDs because they're both probably wanted men. So he has to shoot
Mm-hmm.
the stormtroopers, and then he's got to climb out. And his buddy is injured, right? He can't climb out, and there was no way out of there at that point. So he shoots him in the back. He calms him down, and then shoots him in the back. Like, that's really dark. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of makes sense, right? Because he knows that the guy can't get out of there, right? And if he gets caught by the Empire, his life's going to be horrible torture and misery.
Or he'll
So,
spill the secrets that the
I
rebels
mean,
know.
both, right? It's potentially both. They're going to torture him for that information. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
it's almost being kind in a way, but also, just a dark way for this movie to start, right? He's a fellow rebel and he just shoots him in the back.
I'm looking forward to Andor expanding on that, and
Yeah.
how did he become a person who could shoot his friend in the back? And I was watching last night. I'm thinking about all the things that Andor could be, and I was watching that moment, and I thought, what if the other actors in Andor and they're friends, like the weight that will be on that moment in that movie. I feel like the Andor show is going to change a lot about the way you see this movie, but I think it'll be mostly for the better. Like, you think
Yeah.
of how much weight that moment will carry if you realize they were best friends or even worked together
Often.
regularly. Like, you just
Yeah.
think of like all he's doing. Then he literally talks about this later. We've all sacrificed for the rebellion. And
Mm-hmm.
I think part of what he means by sacrificing is he's sacrificed part of his soul.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think I've heard a lot of people kind of wonder that question, and it really calls into question, not only his morals, but really his ideology, right? Cassian's, that he could do that, right? But when you watch this movie, and like I did the last time that I watched this, and obviously like having all these different questions in my head of, why did they go with this? How did they do this? And then the more that I thought about it, most likely General Draven, right? He was the one that said to kill Galen, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was Draven, I think. So like what I was thinking is, he was very quick to be that way on that mission. What if that was the mission that he had before? So he said, you need to go get this information. And, either if you can't get the information, or if he's going to get, if that information is going to get to the Empire somehow, to kill him.
This
So like
wasn't
he could have possibly been following orders. It wasn't like this last minute thing, like that he had mentally to decide, should I do this or not do this? It was his mission from the very beginning.
Yeah,
it was interesting
General
that
Draven.
yeah, it's interesting that you bring this part up because he told Cassian to kill Galen. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is I was having this discussion with Kaloni, and we're thinking, well, that's kind of dark for a rebellion, just to kill someone. And
Mm-hmm.
and where we talked about that he doesn't know he doesn't know that it's too late. I mean, killing Galen at this point, it just doesn't matter. It's too
Mm-hmm.
late. It's already built, so it's
Yep.
kind of pointless. And he doesn't trust the sources and stuff. So he's doing what he thinks is right, even if it's not what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so
And
he's not trying to do it cynically. He's not trying to be the bad guy.
Right. Yeah. And I think that once again, holding Sith deal in absolutes and things like that, or, they're they're too dangerous to be left alive, right? I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of like the story here with him. Like you said, you don't know it was over. All we know is that this person has the ability to create this crazy weapon or whatever it is.
Yep.
But I feel like, that's where Jin is able to balance out the situation, right? And say, then you're no different than a stormtrooper. Like if you're
Yeah.
just going to blindly follow
blindly following
orders.
orders.
Yeah, and so I think that was a really good takeaway from that. And once again, I just want to jump back into the chat. So editor said, Rogue One was the only Disney Star Wars film to have its story planned out properly and not have production problems. And then later said, shame that we'll probably never have another Star Wars film. And oh man, I really hope that's not true, because I think
Right.
they've not necessarily been missed, but they've had an amazing hit here, and then a really good movie with Solo as well. I really hope that they can continue to figure out little pieces of the Star Wars universe that they can like cut out and make like an amazing movie, that maybe gives meaning to other movies, but isn't, fully connected. And I think
Right.
that's why they did so great with this one, is they gave us a story that we knew next to nothing about, but still had like, it was still grounded to stories that we already knew and loved. And so I think
Yep.
that's why they just hit this out of the park.
So
Well,
I'll
and
say,
I feel like the sorry, Tyler. Is it okay if I talk?
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say.
Thank you, Tyler.
I was gonna say, it is sad that we'll probably. I mean, I'm not saying we're not gonna have another Star Wars story film. It is
did.
sad because on top of the news that Rogue Squadron was, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't want to say it was delayed. It was just removed from Disney's schedule of things coming up, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, we kind of are we're getting story of Star Wars TV, right?
Yeah.
And what's the trade-off between TV and film? I mean, usually you get more backstory in film or in TV, because like Mandalorian, instead of being a Mandalorian movie that's 2 hours long, we got 7 hours of content, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the big difference is usually budget, right? TV's got much smaller
Mhm.
budget and doesn't look as good. But what they've been doing especially with the volume, it looks fantastic. And I know Andor hasn't used the volume. They've gone big on Andor doing practical sets.
One thing I'll say with the volume
is film quality filming for TV. And that's kind of why I think they're advertising it so big. They want HBO streaming numbers of people to come in and watch Andor. That's what they want.
And Andor was like one of the first ones they announced of making a TV show, and we've gotten 2 seasons in The Mandalorian and all of this other shows since, but it was like Andor was one of the very first announced shows.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, and and they've been working on it for a while too, and I think they're kind of swinging big with this one, with wanting big numbers on this, and I really hope it succeeds. I really hope it does well, because I want to see more Star Wars. Like, that's not a question of do I want to see more Star Wars out there.
So Sendit said wasn't Star Wars or wasn't Rogue having staffing issues? Actually, and so back to editor's point about being planned out, it actually wasn't. They did a ton of reshoots on this way near the end. Go back and look. There's scenes in the trailers that are not in the movie. There's lots of scenes in the trailer that aren't in the movie.
So a lot of the story rewrites and then the reshoots that had to be done for this film were the director, Garth Edwards, thinking that Disney wouldn't let him kill all the characters, because that's not a very Disney thing.
Yeah.
And so he had his original plan, what he wanted to do, but then what he had to write for Disney, because he thought, you can't kill everybody because it's a Disney product. But then Disney gave him the okay to do that, so then he could go with what he really wanted. So really, that was the story he had from the get-go. And I feel like this movie was really good. So Garth, the director, he says that Star Wars is the reason that he got into filmmaking. Like, it's obviously something that he was passionate about.
I want to see. I'd like to see him do more.
Like, oh, I would too, for sure.
Big time.
He also did
with this product.
the first of the new MonsterVerse series, the first Godzilla of the current
yeah,
ones.
the first one.
Yeah,
That's what he was
was
wrapped
really
up
good too.
before he did this.
Yeah,
But like I was saying, I felt like he brought passion into it, but without just trying to remake the same thing we've all seen.
you know,
before.
he's in the movie. he's
he's Death Star, right?
No,
Isn't he
I
one of
think
the guys
I think Ryan Johnson's in the
rail?
Death Star.
Oh,
Ryan
yeah,
Johnson's in the Death Star. Garth Edwards is at the very end. He's the one that pulls the lever to detach the Tentative 5 from the Raditz.
Launch.
Or from the, what's the ship? I don't know. Admiral Radiss's ship.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I can tell you the name of the ship here in my Rogue One, the Ultimate Visual Guidebook that I have because I love this movie.
So, but yeah, there was the profundity. That I love. There are so many good moments in this movie.
Oh,
and
when we get to the battle on Scarif, there's a lot to talk about with this movie.
So this is the one thing I think what makes this movie better than like Solo and other Star Wars movies. I feel like in Star Wars, there's one thing in Star Wars that every show, every movie needs, and it's the one thing that is Star Wars, and that's the Force. Mm-hmm. The Force is Star Wars. It's and that's, I think that is why The Mandalorian does so well. Yeah, you're looking at other areas where you're doing Mandalorian culture and stuff, but you have Grogu there who's Force sensitive, and you can see how the Force touches the world, and so it's still part of it. Yeah. I don't think and that's one of this thing that this movie has versus like maybe Solo, where you have Chewett, who's I am one with the Force is with me. He's, and I don't care what anyone says. He's Force sensitive to me. He seems Force sensitive, but not in a way he can control it. It's almost like he can see it, but he can't control it. And it's almost like the Force helps him see, but it's not like he can't Force push the lever. And right. I also feel like there's moments where the Force just uses him to get its will done.
It's more like the Force can use him, not he can use the Force. Yeah, and I get what you're saying. This is the first Star Wars movie we got that wasn't like around the Jedi, right? Yeah, it's not a Jedi centered movie. But there's just enough of that mystery of the Force in this one that kind of connects it to that the world of the Jedi. It's talked about. Krennic says the last relic of the Jedi are gone when he talks about Jedha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Kyber crystals, the Church of the Wills. Which do you know what that's in reference to, Josiah? The Church of the Wills. The Guardian. So Chirrut and Baze are what's called Guardians of the Wills, and the Book of the Wills is what George Lucas originally called the Force. That was it. There was like this book that gave you the power. It was the Book of the Wills. So the Wills is kind of like the Force, and so it's kind of like an ancient religion devoted to the study of the Force and the Jedi. Nice. So not necessarily those who are Force sensitive or those who can use the Force, but those who are devout to it.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. Since you guys kind of brought that up or whatever, is I do like that in Star Wars when they kind of like dive into either other cultures or other planets or other like groups of people who either A, just study the Force, B, can semi use the Force. They understand it enough to semi use the Force, or full on groups of people that can 100% use the Force. For instance, like the Night Sisters or something like that. Like I do love the fact that you can kind of dive into these other groups of people that aren't Jedi and aren't Sith, because I think that's more interesting. Because if you go by everything that we've learned about the Force, then everyone to certain degrees has the Force flowing through them, and like there's going to be certain people that can connect to it more than others, but they with practice and study you can even use it in a more fuller capacity. So I think that's really interesting when you start diving into different groups like these guardians of the wills or whatever, because I think that then it makes it more like this. Okay, this isn't just like a Jedi thing, this isn't just a Sith thing. The Jedi and the Sith were two basically religious groups who took the Force and decided to make their own belief system based on the use of the Force for their own will, basically.
Yeah. And we've kind of been just all over the place, but where we were at talking about the film, you get to Jeddah, right? And you just see this massive statue of a Jedi that has obviously been crashed to the ground, right? But how cool was that? Like I remember the first time seeing that in the theaters, just seeing this massive statue, and you're seeing like, because Tyler and I we're huge fans of the Old Republic era, so this kind of ancient Jedi and ancient studies of the Jedi, at least to me, is really fascinating. And I just remember
it feels a little bit like
so cool.
Korriban from Knights of the Republic, but more like Jedi. And I think that's kind of what the Guardians of the Wills are, is you can kind of think of them as the opposite of the Sith cultists that were in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
They're more like they're there. They know that the Jedi are good. They help them whenever they can. That's what Lor Santeca is. He was a friend of Luke's, and he if you read Shadow of the Sith, one of the new books, he's good friends with Luke. He's not a Jedi or anything, but he knows that the Jedi are needed, and he's helping him out. He's the one that hands Poe the map to Luke Skywalker. So
it's kind of like not Jedi themselves, but like it's possible that the Church of the Wills, they could have been like servants to the Jedi when the Jedi had a large presence on Jeddah. And I mean, we really don't know how much of a presence they even had on Jeddah pre Order 66, right? Like everything there seems very ancient and almost abandoned. So the Jedi could have left their outpost on Jeddah a long time ago, and then there's still these devout, Guardians of the Wills that are there. And obviously there was a temple, because I talk about taking the kyber crystals from the Temple of the Wills.
Yeah,
like they potentially took over the old Jedi outpost and had control over that.
And I really like Chirrut might be my favorite character in this movie, because when he first meets Jin, he says to her as they're leaving, "The biggest stars have hearts of kyber," which is like really interesting to me, because obviously we know that the Empire was taking kyber crystals in order to use for the Death Star, and it just the way he says it's kind of ironic, because the biggest star, as in the Death Star, is got a heart of kyber in order to power itself. But I like his.
Well, because he tells Jin when he first meets him, "I'll trade you that necklace for a glimpse of your future." And she goes, "How do you know I'm wearing a necklace?" And it's that necklace that her mom gave her at the start, which is a kyber crystal. So he can feel the energy from that crystal.
That's another point that I say I say he's force sensitive to a bit. I mean, just even if just a tiny bit. Obviously, we know from what Obi-Wan says in A New Hope that the Force is in everyone. It binds the whole galaxy together. So everyone has it to an extent. It's whether you can use it versus whether you can see it. You look at like the Thrawn books, they have what they are called Skywalkers, where they can basically navigate through the asteroids just by sight. They call it third sight.
Mm-hmm.
And so just how they can use the Force just is different. And I love Chirrut because when they're in that fight and so I love all the scenes that you get in this movie. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. One thing that's really cool about this movie is scale. Garth, the cinematography is really good at scale. We see a Star Destroyer right next to the dish being placed into the Death Star, so you can really see how big the Death Star is versus a Star Destroyer. And then later in the scene, or in the movie, when they're Jin and Cassian are looking at the city of Jeddah, it's way up there on this giant plateau, but it's like way up there. It's a long way to climb because you can see it down from their angle where they're looking way up there. But then you go like, oh, that's a massive city way up high. And then there's a giant Death Star sitting over top of it. Just
The Star Destroyer.
the Star Destroyer, yeah. And so you can see
one of my favorite scenes.
You can see the scale. And then there's another shot of the city, and you can see an ATST walking around. And it's another
that is like my favorite.
Just
scene
another
of the
thing
entire
is
movie.
A scale. And
As,
so you
as
can
strange
get
that might sound, such a little scene. That scene where it zooms out and you just see the busy, full of life city and an ATST just patrolling the streets, just walking through the streets, just makes it feel so real. Like that technology is there. There's a chicken walker just patrolling the streets, and I love that scene. It gives me goosebumps every time I see it.
But it's like there's so many instances of this where you can see scale, and it gives you a more, especially because there are some scenes with the Death Star that give you that sense of dread, and like Obi-Wan says, or maybe it's Han who says, oh no, it's Luke. They're headed for that small moon, and you can tell it's a huge space station. And so there's so many instances, and I just want to talk about that where you see the city and you can see the scale, and it just kind of gives you a more sense of dread of those things in particular.
I think one thing this movie did really, really well, and it's largely praise to the writers and directors who are passionate about Star Wars. The number of Easter egg and fan service moments, but that aren't out of place and don't detract anything from those that don't notice, are awesome. Early on, you get the prison planet, Wobani. Do you know that Easter egg, Josiah? It's just Obi-Wan split up into different the letters rearranged.
No,
to Wobani.
That's funny.
It's just, I mean, stuff like that. That in no way would take from it. But there's a lot of like fan service Easter eggs that happen at the Battle of Scarif that I definitely am excited to talk about.
I like, so Andor and K2SO. K2SO is like, this is why this movie is so good. They do such a good job with these small characters that we barely get to see, we just met, and that you feel for all of them because they all die.
Yeah.
But you feel for everyone, and it's again kind of how I've talked about in, say, like Rise of Skywalker and stuff, about the characters' relationships with each other. That's where you get it. You get K2SO and Cassian's relationship, Chirrut and Baze's relationship,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so devastating when they die, and
Yeah.
so that's how you build. Go ahead.
I think K2 might be one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character of this whole movie. I love K2, and when I was watching it, and at the end when he seals the vault, I was like, man, again, another point where just Star Wars droids are so much more than just robots, right? I mean, we all we love quirky R2 and choppers killing everybody and cursing a storm up, but we get all these droids are. It's such an alive world, and these droids are so much more than just like machines, and you can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Plus
Yeah, the humor with K2SO also was really good. Like
oh yeah,
It
I
doesn't feel
feel
out of
like,
place either.
yeah, it's not
like
like it's not
super
like
forced or anything.
yeah, it's not forced. It's not like haha, here's a funny moment, but
Mhm.
I mean, I do like the actor who plays K2,
Right.
Alan Tudyk. He's great in everything that he does. He's funny, and did you know that the part where they're excuse me, where they're on Jeddah and the stormtrooper stops them and says, "Where you're taking these prisoners?" And he's like, "I'm taking them to imprison them in prison," right?
Yeah.
And then Cassian kind of chirps up, and K2 just smacks him, right?
Yeah.
There's another one if you mouth off again. That wasn't planned. That was ad-libbed. That was just out of nowhere. If you watch it really closely, you can see Cassian. He covers his face where he got hit, but he's covering a laugh because he's laughing about it because he just out of nowhere got slapped. So he's laughing about it, but he's like, you can see it and they just went with it because it fit. But
awesome.
The actor is covering a laugh because he got smacked out of nowhere. It's awesome. I love that
He
they
did a good enough cover
enough of a
to
smile.
keep it in.
He covered it enough that they could keep it, but you can still see that it's there. And
Yeah,
I
you
love
can.
that.
I like at the end after that battle there where he's like, "And Cassian, sorry about the slap."
Yeah, he apologizes for it. Like Editor said, he really hopes that K2 shows up in Andor, and I'm
pretty sure they've already said. I don't think they've shown any
previews for it, but I do think it's been announced. But I really think that they have to, right? I feel like you're going to get the scene of how he becomes in service to Andor. Like I want to see that scene because that's got to happen. And then they're going to be buddies. I hope we get that in like season, episode like 3 or 4, right? And then they get their relationship together the rest of the season, working together on missions.
So talking about K2, later in the movie, he says to Jin, "I'll be there for you, Jin." Cassian said I had to, but but I think K2 just has a sense of humor because because in the moment where what is it when Guerrera's guys show up after they've fought all the stormtroopers, and he stands out and goes one hostile, and Jin steps out. No, he's with or it's Baze that targets him, and Jin steps in front of K2 and says no, and you can see it, and I love the way they do his eyes. He looks down, and I believe that is the moment he realizes that she's different than what his first initial thoughts of her, and so I think he just later that where he says Cassian says I have to is just him being funny.
Yeah, and I think it was perfect timing because he's looking her directly in the face and realizes that meant something to her. He saw that when she said when he said that to her, that it kind of like broke her down a little bit, like, wow, like this is, that's, that touched her in a way. And so I think, like you said, then he threw that in there at the end to kind of break like a, too mushy situation or whatever.
Break the tension.
You brought it up with his eyes. I was noticing that a lot in this watch through. A lot of his expression is all in his eyes. He doesn't blink.
100%.
He can barely move them, but there's a lot of expression he says in his eyes, and they did a really good job of all of it. And that's like most of his expressions are done with his eyes, and it's great. And I
Mhm.
love he's just perfect little quips, like where did you get that blaster? I found it. I found
Yeah.
that answer vague and unconvincing. But
Yeah.
like it's not wrong. That's a
Or
correct
even
statement. It sounds vague and unconvincing.
yeah, or
You want
even
to know
just like
you want
at
to know
the
the odds?
beginning, like when he's like, "Why does she get a blaster and I don't?"
Yeah. You know the odds of her using it
Mm.
against us? And Cassian's just kind of like annoyed. He
Mhm.
just instead of going like C3PO 3,720 to 1, he goes, high. It's very high.
Yeah.
Like he gives the right information. None of it's
Uh-huh.
wrong. It's not, it's not like he's cracking jokes. It's just he's saying
Mhm.
factual things with attitude and
Yeah.
personality.
And I thought another interesting point is when they're on Edo and like I'm trying to think of it's when uh Chirrut, he's like, what did he say? He says something along the lines of like, you know, that he can sense that he's
The
gonna
force is
about to kill
dark
someone.
around those who are about to kill.
Right.
Isn't that
And
it?
so then she's like, "What?" And then
Well, he asked
anyway,
he asked Baze because he's blind, and that's some other comedy that's amazing.
yeah.
But yeah, I did want to talk about this point because when Chirrut and he tells Andor, Cassian takes Bodhi, and to go and spy out the facility.
Mhm.
And then so Chirrut asks, "Does he have the face of a killer?"
Yeah, that's what it is.
And
Yeah.
and Baze says, "No, he has the face of a friend."
I
Mhm.
love that line. The face of a friend.
Yeah.
Like their relationship and the way they see the world is awesome. And you get it in that
Mhm.
line right there. No, he
Yeah.
has the face of a friend.
Mhm. I love that like so in that moment too is where K2SO says, "Well, he does have like his rifle in the sniper formation
In
or whatever."
configuration,
You
yeah.
know, yeah, configuration. And I thought that was really interesting. And it kind of had me like sit there and think about it for a minute because giving that information in a way was kind of going against Andor, right? He was kind of going against Cassian in
Mm-hmm.
giving her that information because he must have known what was going to happen if he told that information to her. And I feel like that was like a really good kind of turning moment in their relationship for one, but two, it's kind of interesting because you're like, oh, he's going almost directly against Cassian. But when you really think about it, he's actually on Cassian's side. He wants her to go and stop Cassian from doing that, you know?
Mhm.
So it's kind of just like a really cool, deeper connection that he had that he doesn't want Cassian to do that, right? You know, like because he's giving that information knowing that she's obviously going to go and try to stop him.
And this is another point where uh, Jin asks, "Well, why do you ask that? Why does she?" I think she says, "Why do you ask if he has the face of a killer?" And Chirrut also responds, "The Force moves darkly around a creature about to kill."
Yeah.
And I'm just, there's the little nuggets that you get about the Force from a movie that's not supposed to be about the Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was going to talk about that too because that actually brings like some really cool meaning and some deeper understanding of lots of other different shows, books, movies. You know, like when you really think about just that super basic point that people
Mm-hmm.
like, Jedi have the ability to know basically the intentions of somebody before they do it, right? So
Yeah.
even if
Mm-hmm.
you think of like think of the Mace Windu Palpatine, Mace Windu Sidious fight, you know, that there's two things you can think about. One, Mace Windu could feel that coming from Sidious, that he's going to kill, obviously. He was already killing everybody else on top of that. But then on the other hand, Anakin probably could feel that Mace Windu was going to kill him, even before it
Yeah.
happened. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it
That,
Yeah.
wasn't just that he was saying, "Oh, he's too dangerous to be left alive." He wasn't like that still didn't 100% say that Mace Windu was going to kill him if he had the chance. But Anakin could have possibly felt that was going to happen, and that's why he did it right before. But
I mean,
yeah, it's kind of interesting.
This point is probably one of the strongest points to Tyler's thought of Chirrut being somewhat force sensitive. Because if you think like Rebels, Kanan gets blinded, right? But that doesn't, once he kind of accepts it and works on it, he leans on the Force to be his eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of think of it as almost like Daredevil, right? Blind, but he can hear because he can see because of noises and stuff, right? Well, that's kind of like what the Force is for Chirrut. It's not like because of the Force he can see everything as good as anybody else, but he can feel what's happening around him.
I mean, come on.
Especially like
a blind person does not get a crossbow and shoot a TIE fighter out of the air with one shot.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's some force there.
Yeah, or the other thing, like it just reminded me too, or like Yoda and Kashyyyk, right?
Yeah.
Like if you watch that timing of them, like some people have said, like, oh, he heard the transmission of them across the top, right? That is possible. He has those big ears and everything. But now, if you kind of think about it this way, being able to hear that Order 66, that still wouldn't have had meaning for him.
Exactly.
If he heard execute Order 66, that doesn't necessarily have meaning. So I think that's another thing that's like, oh, he probably felt that these, clone troopers were about to kill.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's real. I actually really like that. I've always thought of that moment being he can just feel the darkness that's surrounding the entire everything and what is about to happen. I feel like, but I also like that point where the darkness moves around the creature about to kill, and I really like that idea.
So from the Rogue One Ultimate Visual Guide, we're talking about so Chirrut's gun is called the light bow. Is what it's called.
Ooh.
It describes it as the light bow is a traditional handcrafted weapon built by a guardian of the Wills upon completion of the seventh dawn, marking the guardian's progression to physical perfection.
Wow.
The bow is largely related to the bowcaster weapons built by the Wookiees of Kashyyyk. The limbs of the bow extend on articulated risers. Each is tipped with a polarizer array that draws a charge particle round from the serving barrel. The released blast is more powerful than a heavy rifle.
That's why I was able to shoot down a TIE fighter.
That's awesome.
But that of physical perfection, there was another. Well, keep going. I'm gonna find this other statement about him in here somewhere.
No. I was just saying that's just like someone without the Force, a blind person without the Force, doesn't one-shot a TIE fighter out of the air.
Yeah.
And I love again. He decides before he gets to that moment, he decides he's gonna go after Jyn, and Baze is like, "You're going after Jyn alone," and he's like, "Good luck." And he goes to Chirrut, "I don't need luck. I have you."
That's such an amazing part too.
And he's like, "Ah, crazy old fool, whatever." Then you could just tell him, he's like, "All right, whatever. I follow you anywhere."
Right.
And I like how Baze is kind of cynical of the way he views the world, but there's a moment where, because Baze almost makes fun of Chirrut for praying when they're in the cell, because he's saying, "I'm one with the Force is with me. I'm one with the Force is with me," and so he says, Chirrut says to Cassian about Baze. Baze used to be the most devoted guardian of us all. And so it's kind of an interesting turn where he's kind of the cynical one.
Yeah.
But I also love the fact, like, the way they end and where he has to hit the master switch and and the way Baze is just crying for him, come back, you old fool, and
Mm-hmm.
and as soon as he does that, and I love their Chirrut's final words are, "Look for me in the Force, and you'll always find me."
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
So
so Baze starts saying, "I'm one with the Force is with me," as he goes and destroys a few more Death Troopers.
Mhm.
so this page is just about Chirrut, and it says Chirrut Imwe believes that all living things are connected through the Force. His sightless eyes do not prevent him from being a highly skilled warrior. Though he seemingly lacks Force abilities, this warrior monk has rigorously honed his body through intense physical and mental discipline. And then, so
Mhm.
kind of gives some more background on the Guardians. Chirrut is from a near extinct order, the Guardian of the Wills, which is devoted to protecting the Temple of the Kyber in the holy city of Jeddah. An ancient order, its origins are lost to time and inextricably woven into the legends of the Jedi Knights. Some believers insist the Jedi drew inspiration from the followers of Jeddah, while historians summarize it as likely the opposite. Whatever the truth, it is all a matter of the deepest faith of Chirrut. Chirrut does not speak of how he became blinded, but due to the simplicity of Jeddah medicine, the condition is real and irreversible. He has adapted his new state well, and with mental discipline that filters the most crucial information from his remaining senses, and a keen control of body that allows him to move with pinpoint precision through his imagined surroundings. So it's not
Mhm.
just, it's almost like I was thinking like, yeah, maybe he's somewhat force sensitive, but maybe it's that everyone is somewhat force sensitive. And
Well,
when
that's
he's
kind of
honed
what I was saying.
himself, when he's honed himself that way and had to rely on those things after being blinded, it's almost opened him up to
That's
more aspects of the force.
kind of what I was
Mhm.
saying, is that he can't like use it, but he can kind of feel it and see it.
Mhm.
He can feel the Force moving, like he can feel a TIE fighter moving through the air, whereas
Yeah, exactly.
he can't pull the TIE fighter
Stop
out
it.
of the air with the Force,
Mhm.
but he can sense its movement.
Hmm.
Because you see that when he is attacked by all the stormtroopers, and he's dodging blaster bolts, and he's fighting them all with the
With his stick.
with his stick there. Uh, I always like that moment because I think it's one of the funniest moments in the movie. Uh, he when the Saw Gerrera's crew captures them and
Mhm.
handcuffs them and everything, and then they put a bag over everyone's head. But they put a bag
Mhm.
over Chirrut's head, and he goes, "Are you kidding me? I'm blind."
Yeah.
Hmm. So
Yeah. I.
uh,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say another thing about that staff of his. On one end of it,
Mhm.
it has a kyber crystal in it, and
Mhm.
it's described as it allows Chirrut to better gauge where the end of his staff is. So, as we discussed earlier with Jin's kyber crystal, he
Yeah.
could sense that he knows where it's at, and that helps
Mhm.
him, know where his weapon is while he's using it.
Yeah.
I do love that line.
Yeah, because it's a great moment when he gets it thrown to him and can catch it. It
Yeah,
goes back to that same thing that he can sense it just like he was able to sense the necklace.
Yep.
I feel like this we've kind of really just gone on all different directions for this movie, but I feel like this movie is more about characters than it is necessarily it's time and what's going on. It's the characters that make this movie great.
Yeah, I do think like one really interesting thing and direction this movie kind of goes is with the rebellion at this moment. The decisions that they're in, the infighting, basically like the almost like the semi-civil war within the rebellion about what's the right thing
Yeah.
to do and all this. Like it was really interesting because I feel like a lot of times you feel like the rebellion's just it's always good, it's peaceful, it's, unified. And this really, like,
Mm-hmm.
it was a great time, in I guess, like, the rebellion's history, to really dive into, like, into something when nothing's going right.
Yeah.
Their backs against the wall and everything, so everyone's showing, like, their true colors. I really think that, it was such a cool thing to get Bail Organa in there once again, like, kind of
Mm-hmm.
grounding this movie
Yeah.
to characters we know and love and care about. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like, teasing for the end of the film too. But yeah, I think that was another thing that this movie did amazing, was it took something that we felt we knew everything about, right? And then it just kind of, like, when you're sitting there, in the council with them, and everyone's like, we're gonna leave, and, like, like, we're
Well,
not
yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
it's
It's making
crazy.
it it's making it a real thing. Like that council
Yeah.
is full of senators, imperial senators. Bail. That's
Hmm.
what Bail Organa was. He was an
Same
imperial
with Mon
Yeah.
senator.
Mothma.
Yeah,
Yeah, same.
and
Yeah.
and that's what these people are, and it shows you that the rebellion isn't just people who are fighting, right? The
Right.
rebellion are people who can fight, but also Bail Organa was doing everything he could while he was under the reign of the Empire to still try to help people through the Senate.
Right.
He wasn't just like, all
Hmm.
right, it's the Empire, we'll let them do whatever they want, whatever.
Hmm.
He was
And it was like
he was using the tools he had,
yeah,
even
they
if
were
he couldn't
fighting on two
physically
different
fight.
fronts.
Yep.
Hmm.
I
They were
kind of want
fighting
to talk.
in the Senate just as much as they were behind the scenes. And so I think that is another cool thing to think about, is, they're trying to help that, he was obviously doing everything he could to help Alderaan, right, for his
Mm-hmm.
people. But then in the huge votes about things, whether it was like, trade and, things like that, embargoes and whatever, he was still trying to do everything he could, for the people there. But then it was like your classic hero. Like, all of these people that were in the council were just, were similar to, like, you brought it up earlier, but like a daredevil, right? So he's in fighting for law and order as a lawyer, doing everything he can within those parameters. But then when that that doesn't work, then
Hmm.
he takes matters into his own hands, and that's what all of them were doing. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to talk more about that council meeting, but I also wanted to bring out, did that line when they're walking away and Mon Mothma is like, the Jedi that helped you, you should contact the Jedi, and he's like,
Yeah.
I'll send word. He served me well in the Clone Wars. But did you
Hmm.
think of that when she says, well, you need to send someone that you can trust, and he says, I'll trust her with
Yeah.
my life. Did that not feel? I feel like that line felt different after the Obi-Wan show.
Yeah. Big time.
And when you get Bail and Leia's relationship in there, and that
Hmm.
he's going to have her contact Obi-Wan, and
Hmm.
that whole moment, it had more power now with
Yeah.
seeing all the three of them's relationship from the Obi-Wan
Hmm.
show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew it was
And
coming, but it gave me big time goosebumps in that moment, because, yeah, I was
Yeah.
just thinking about that, like exactly what you just said. You're thinking about the relationship of Bale and his adopted daughter, building this
mm-hmm.
really strong relationship. He's seeing her, be wise beyond her years, and, powerful, strong, independent from such a young age, and even the kind of like the last episode, right, of Obi-Wan, when he said, "Let's do it together." I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
that drawback was so amazing. And then, like, on top of that, then you start thinking of, like, Obi-Wan and the relationship of all three, and, like, you got to know, if there's not going to be any Obi-Wan, which I hope there is, but if there's none, and that's the last story we ever get, and that's the last time he ever sees Leia, that's a huge moment, because he
Mm-hmm.
knows in his head there's going to be a reunion of, his daughter and Obi-Wan, that had such a beautiful relationship. And so it's kind of like, and I think when he's kind of turning, right, and he has, like, that smile on his face, right,
Yeah.
that it's just like, he's probably so excited that they're gonna get to meet again after all these years.
Yeah, it was just one of those great moments, especially because I'm pretty sure it's Mon Mothma talking to him, and so
Yeah.
again you get all of that, and the whole Rebel Alliance and everything, and in the emphasis, and you can see everything. You can see that it's already laid out and what's going on. The sad thing I always feel like is that the moment also like made me really sad, because I realized that means Bail is going to Alderaan.
I know.
And you know that's at least in canon, chronologically, that's probably the last moment you'll actually see of Bail Organa.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they do more with him, it's gonna be prequel era stuff. That's probably the last moment he'll get before A New Hope, which obviously we know he dies because he's on Alderaan.
Yeah, unless we get to see
the
the conversation with him and Leia. Him saying to go see
Obi-Wan.
Oh man, if they somehow can do that,
cool.
Oh man, that'd be so amazing, because she'd be so excited too now, right? Oh man, that'd be cool.
I'm gonna go back to Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
that's Tatooine. No, I hate sand. That's your father talking.
Yeah.
So, I love all the scenes in this movie that take place on Yavin 4 at the Masashi Temple. That was awesome to see more of that, more of the rebellion there. Like that's their secret base, right? It's not like Coruscant or something. It's a place we knew about but wasn't really explored. And there's even another one of those sly Easter eggs that I said. There's a part where you see like a zoomed out of the temple, and you see the ghost sitting there from Rebels. And
you can see Chopper. You can
see.
I'm
thinking like a casual viewer might go, "Oh, that's a cool new starship, a cool new freighter, cool looking design." But us nerds are like, "That's the ghost, right?" Like, I mean, that's awesome to us, but it's one of those things that does not take away in any from the film. It's just something sitting there. It's just a cool design of a freighter, but to us, it's awesome.
Speaking of other Easter eggs, you do see Chopper rolling around, and you can actually hear him. I didn't realize until this rewatch, you can hear him in the background. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Yep.
And it's like, it's great. But then there's later in the movie, you hear, you can't quite tell what they're saying, if they're trying to get them to come or whatever, but it says General Syndulla, I think it's like to the conference room or something.
Report to something. Yeah, General Syndulla report to something. I can't remember where to, but yeah, you get that Easter egg, dropping that name, General Syndulla.
Yeah.
Because we know Rebels ends not too long before this, but a good amount before this, right? And so at that,
but there are some scenes of them on Yavin 4. There are some.
Yes, there are scenes on Yavin 4 and Rebels too, and but I don't know if she's a general by that point, but you can kind of see that her progression in the rebellion, and at this point here, she is a general.
Yeah, and you do see the ghost later on in the battle over Scarif. And so, speaking of the council meeting, they're all arguing. They're like, they don't want to go to war. They want to find a way to change things without having to full on go to war. But some of them,
they're also scared of that.
Yeah, because they feel like if they go to war, then they're just going to be annihilated.
Yeah, well, because you got to think they're. I'm not going to say every senator is good, but if they're in this rebellion, they're probably, Bail Organa, Padme, Mon Mothma kind of senators, right?
Right.
Who deeply care about more than just themselves.
Yeah.
So you've got to be thinking about every action that Bail Organa is taking in this rebellion is going to affect his planet. Unfortunately for him, he kind of loses.
Yeah.
He bet big, and I mean it needed to. It saved the galaxy, but it cost him a lot. So when these senators are talking about going to war, they're not just thinking, oh, I might die. You're a senator. You're not likely to be fighting on the front lines, but you'll be leading a people that are going to suffer a lot in an open war, especially against someone who has the ability to completely destroy your planet, just wipe it out in an instant and everything's gone.
Yeah.
So that's a thing I like to think about, is that the senators here are good people. You know, they might disagree about how to run the rebellion. They might want to just turn tail and fight, but that's because they're thinking about the people that they're serving and are responsible for taking care of.
But they don't all agree.
No,
That's what I like. Radis is like, no, I say we fight. We fight.
Yeah.
I love Raditz.
I love it. Yeah.
And I like, so after that, you get the scene where they're like, they were never going to listen to you. Cassian says they were never going to listen to you. And but he says that, I just love his approach there of like, we've all given so much for the rebellion. We've all sacrificed. We've all done bad things for the rebellion. And that because he says, because I told myself it was for a cause I believed in. And so he's basically saying that, and I don't want to stop now. We need to do this. And there's a whole group of people that are like feeling the same way that go to do it. And like, Bodhi's like, well, you know, it'd be cramped, but we'd all fit.
Yeah, no. It's so he was like, well, yeah, I guess we could all be in there. Oh man.
I really like Raditz as a character. I think he's awesome. And I think it fits really well in the fact that people aren't just like, oh, they just wanted another Akbar. But the Mon Calamari were huge in the rebellion, especially on the military side, because they provided a large portion of their capital ships.
Because they're the most durable.
It's not the durability, it's the shield technology. So they live underwater, and underwater, the pressure of underwater is insane. Especially when you start going deep, pressure underwater is incredible. And so they have developed incredibly strong shielding technology. And that's what makes a lot of these Mon Calamari cruisers were luxury, cruise ship type vehicles. But because of that shielding that they have, you strap some cannons onto it and you can go toe to toe with a Death Star because of the shielding technology.
Star Destroyer,
yeah, Star Destroyer. And
it's
so
like, dang.
it makes sense. It makes sense that there'd be a lot of Mon Cala leadership in charge of space forces and fighting. And there's a pretty big comic with Raditz fighting against the Empire, the very early stages, like really early, like 18 BBY, I think is when it takes place, and fighting off the Empire above Mon Cala. And I think Raditz was a great character. He did a really good job, not just using Admiral Akbar, because I feel like they probably could have just thrown Akbar in there and it makes sense, he's for the rebellion from the start, but to create a new character, but one that is respectable.
I like the most, not the most, but one of the things I really enjoyed about them is how good he looks. How good the CGI on them. They're like, that's just an alien there. You don't even like Akbar from the old ones. You could see like, well, that's obviously a guy in a costume, but they take the costume and then add all the CGI effects on it, and it just looks so good.
Yeah. I was gonna kind of bring that small thing up about this movie too. That's another thing that made this movie so incredible, was how they blended the CGI with real in this specific movie was incredible. I mean, everybody's gonna have different, whether how vividly you remember watching in the theater, or if you got to watch a rewatch recently, I'd be super jealous. But if you got to see that, or what your home TV is, right? Everybody's going to have kind of a different experience of what it specifically looks like on wherever you're viewing it. But man, just from remembering the theater to just watching it last night on like a new Samsung TV, I was like, man, it just looks, the movie looks beautiful. The places in Iceland that they filmed in, the last part was in Maldives. oh my goodness, like it was just so beautiful, and the ships were like seamless there. Like all the CGI just it felt right. There wasn't anywhere where I was really like, CGI's right in your face. It just felt fluid.
There was a lot of times you could see, like in the Star Destroyers, where you could tell somebody put a lot of time into hand building that model, and they look amazing.
And the lighting,
like
the
lighting,
lighting
hits them. Yep, and it's like that. A lot of them were like the brand new, not even a scratch mark on them. That almost white kind of gray color. Oh, it looks so good.
I will say, to your point there, the one thing, when I watched it in theaters, I don't remember even like noticing Tarkin that much being, and in my rewatch I was like, okay, I can see now whatever the first time I've ever seen what I can see. But I'm also like, he does so much for this movie that I wouldn't want him not in the movie because the CG wasn't 100%. Though his character is so good in this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't even know who was the actor behind it, but I feel like he did a good job of, again, it's somebody who's trying to be Peter Cushing acting as Tarkin, right? So you're not trying to play a character, you're trying to play a character
right
as someone else played a character. And I thought like his mannerisms and everything was really well done. And the voice is fantastic. They did a great job with the voice.
I don't remember who the actor was, but I believe I remember reading a story. But this isn't the first time he's done voiceover work as Peter Cushing.
Yeah,
It's not the first time that he had done,
not necessarily in Star Wars, but as Peter Cushing.
Yeah, Peter Cushing's voices, and so he had done research and stuff. I don't know this for sure, but I would be willing to bet that he's the same guy who's been voicing him in like the Bad Batch and.
Oh yeah, I guarantee you it's got to be. And I feel like, I don't know, do they show Tarkin's feet in this movie?
I don't know.
Did you know in
why you got like a foot fetish?
No. So in A New Hope, you only see Tarkin from the waist up in any shot ever, and it's because Peter Cushing thought that
he wasn't wearing.
No, he was wearing pants. It was the shoes that the costume department had for Tarkin. He said they're uncomfortable, so he just wore his slippers whenever he was filming. Could you imagine just like Tarkin wearing slippers everywhere because it's more comfortable? And it's Peter Cushing. Like, he was a decorated actor of the time. He was. Oh yeah. He was one of two big names in Star Wars, A New Hope, and so George wasn't about to go, no, you can't do that. Like, it was his choice.
Him and Alec Guinness.
Yeah. And it's like, you're not going to tell them that you can't do that. No, that's what's going to happen. And okay, well, film me from the waist up.
Yeah.
I love that story. I'm just picturing Leia walking in. I recognized your stench when I was brought on board. It's just this old man in slippers.
And it was from his feet.
Like, you're so mean to this old man, but I guess he's really a really bad guy. It's just it's funny.
I like his. You can see how much of a bad person Tarkin is in this movie, because he basically is a bully to Krennic. He doesn't like Krennic at all. He's been like, oh no, the Emperor's not gonna like what you did. You've been delaying so long. And then when they test it and he's like, oh yeah, this is really great, I'm taking it.
I know. Yeah, and I think it's all those games, right? And we had touched on it kind of before, I believe, like with the Bad Batch, and we talked about her today, but Price, right? Like her story, from the Thrawn books as well, you can start seeing more of that game too, where people are just, like Tarkin's a big player there. And so he's just like doing like shady behind the scenes schemes to maintain his power and his status and his prominence, and not only just for him to get better, but he wants others around him to do bad, right? So he doesn't want to just look good. Exactly. He wants others to look bad as well, to continue to like elevate himself. And this movie played that super well, when exactly what you just said. He's like, oh yeah, like finally it's working. I didn't think you'd be able to pull it off, but since you did, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a big failure of the Empire itself, because
Hmm.
that's kind of what the problems that the Sith had before the rule of two, right? You defeat the other Sith, you become
It's
more
greed.
powerful, you're at the top, and that's just what the Empire was in a whole. Not Force users, but other people, beating down the other guy to get better themselves, and that's the Empire rotting from within, really.
Hmm.
Whereas you don't see that in the rebellion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, if you kind of think about it, now I'm just kind of thinking more about the different scenes in this movie. But one epic scene, and if you kind of think about it, Krennic really did view Tarkin as an enemy, which, well, he should,
Mm-hmm.
based on what
Yep.
happened, right? But Tarkin used a lot of people underneath him, and they were able to benefit based on being kind of like under his wing, so to speak. If
Yeah.
Krennic would have viewed Tarkin as like a partner, and said like, "Oh, I got it working," and he said, "I'm going to take him," be like, "Perfect, just give me a good spot there," right? I feel like that relationship would have been a little different. And then you kind of cut to the scene with Vader. We haven't even really talked about him, but when
Oh, we'll
he's
get
like
there.
saying like, "Oh, you're gonna tell the Emperor about how great I am," and all this type of stuff, and then he just force
Yep.
chokes him, and he says that awesome line where he's like, "Don't choke on
Don't
your
choke on your
aspirations."
aspirations.
It was so amazing. Like it was like
I
that. Anakin was being funny, you know.
I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, that moment, that line though, I noticed so much more, because that's all that Krennic is aspiration. That's what he wants. He
Yeah.
wants to get bigger. He wants you're gonna tell the Emperor, right? I'm gonna have a higher place, and I
Hmm.
love that scene and the irony when the Death Star appears over Scarif and he's lying there being built,
Hmm.
or he's lying there already defeated, and he can see that he's literally killed by his aspirations.
Yeah.
The Death
Yeah.
Star was his project he built, and the irony is that he is killed by his aspiration.
And I love
Mhm.
that Tarkin's like, target the base on Scarif, and what they do is they target the antenna, which is like right where he's sitting. Like the explosion destroys everything eventually, but
Right.
it just boom takes off the very top of the. So it was direct hit on Krennic,
Hmm.
headshot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. I because you kind of giggle at "don't choke on your aspirations," but then I thought about that. That's entirely who he is, and then the
Yeah.
irony that he's killed by his project, his aspirations. It's quite. It's something. I kind of looked at it a new way. Like it was just interesting to be destroyed by the very thing
Vader
that you
warned you
wanted.
not to be destroyed
Yeah.
by.
And it's interesting too because like you see this also in the Obi-Wan series as well. But when Vader is saying that's personal experience. That's what happened to him
Right.
as Anakin. He turned into Vader basically because of his aspirations. He was aspiring to be something greater in the Jedi, and he was continually getting doors closed in his face. And if he could have, stopped aspiring for further than his station, that he wouldn't have, turned. So it is kind of interesting, like when you think of like the bigger picture there too, is he choked on his own aspirations within the Jedi, and that's what led him to where he was at. So this advice wasn't just like an empty advice too. Like he actually lived that same
Mm-hmm.
thing that he was telling him.
It wasn't just a pun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. I wish,
we have
yeah,
a friend.
he like had a little smirk under that helmet.
We have a friend who loves doing puns, and I remember him like, Darth Vader used a pun. He's just laughing so hard about that.
Yeah, that was
but
awesome. I love that scene.
so I love kind of getting back to when they
Wait,
decide
hold
that
on.
they're gonna go fight.
Hold on, we're sorry. We got to the Vader thing, and I gotta keep going with it. This is the movie. This is this piece of Star Wars media that gave us the castle on Mustafar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. That is such a staple. Like right now, you just say, "Where's Vader's base? His castle? It's Mustafar." But this movie's the one that gave us that, and we built. I mean, we had lots of Star Wars media build around that.
Think about the
That-
hate and anger
seeing
you
that-
have
that-
to be.
That fortress, when you see it, the lava flowing through it,
Oh, that's
is
amazing.
so cool when you first see it. That was cinematically amazing. Like you're getting goosebumps the first time you saw it.
Yeah.
Yes. And because, yeah, it's like you don't see a lot of lava, but you're like, oh, I wonder if this is Mustafar. And then it's his castle. And you're like, it's got to be Mustafar. And to think of the anger and the hate and the everything the way he would build his castle. How cynical do you have to be to build your castle where you became disfigured and the menacing figure that you are?
So
Like he just wants to feed that hate. That's the place literally would feed that hate, and that's the whole point of why he would build it on Mustafar.
It's either that or punch your own injuries like Kylo.
Yeah.
I think this castle's a little cooler. But then you know, we get him in his back to tank. We get him in his back to tank where that's where he's like, when he's not being the menacing Vader, he needs some kind of relief from the pain that he's constantly in.
And we didn't really realize this, but this was a huge teaser to the Obi-Wan show of seeing him in the back to tank and and like how he just had servants in his, and he's like, Lord Vader, there's someone here to see you.
Yeah. I know, it's just like a random old guy. But that's another part where when I was watching this, it reminded me of the theater. Because when you see that black robe walking up, I was just like, who's this gonna be?
You
like,
see the shadow, right? Because the door opens and the light comes from behind him. You just see you can see the Vader helmet in the shadow, and
and then that it ends up being
Krennic's
like
face
servants.
getting like nervous.
Yeah.
Like everyone.
I mean, you're talking to Vader.
Well, especially at this point, Vader has a reputation in the Empire, right?
There's pretty much only two people who don't fear Vader, and weirdly, one of them is Tarkin. And the other one would be the Emperor himself.
I feel like Tarkin doesn't fear Vader, but has a deep respect for his ability. Like Tarkin knows that if Vader wanted to kill him, he'd kill him. Like he's not scared of him because he's not scared of that because he knows that he has a prominent position with the Emperor, but he has a respect for his abilities.
Yeah.
So, kind of getting back to that part where they all they leave Yavin 4 to go on the attack. Well, and I love the moment where this is Rogue One. There is no Rogue One.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then and their speech there. And Jin says,
Cassian's
speech. Jin and Cassian's speech
quote
where give a man a stick and give a man a stick and
a man with a stick and nothing to lose can take the day.
Yes. That and then Cassian's like, go out there, we'll set all this stuff and we'll make 10 men feel like 100. And it's just that moment is just awesome. But I like when all the explosions start happening, they get the rebel base gets chatter back from the Empire saying that the Scarif base is under attack.
Or rebels on Scarif.
And so the guy who just receives the transmission, he runs out to General Dravin and Mon Mothma, and relays the message. And they're like, "Where's Admiral Raddus?" And someone just says, "He's returned to his ship. He's going to fight."
Yeah.
I love that.
He didn't convene the council anymore. He was like, "This is it. Yeah, I have these forces under my control, and this is that needs to happen."
And we already have people on the ground. Yep.
There's another scene early on the Scarif when they're in that little shuttle going from the bay into the building. K2, Cassian, and Jin, and Cassian goes, "We're going to need to find a map." And K2 is K2
man.
goes, "Well, I'm sure we'll find one just lying around." And I feel like that line is not just, it's not funny. It's because Cassian then goes, "You know what you have to do," and we see it that he has to, confront, take control of another one of his droids and basically probe it for information. And you can kind of tell it. You feel that in his mannerisms when he says, "I'm sure we'll find a map lying around." And when Cassian says, "You know what you have to do," he's saying, "I don't want to do that," right?
Yeah.
He said, "I don't want to hurt another droid like that," even though he knows he has to. You could tell that he's not. It's one of those, we've all done terrible things for the Rebel Alliance. That's one of K2's terrible things that he ends up having to do that he doesn't really want to do.
Yeah.
And I love the battle above Scarif. It is one of the coolest. It's one of the best battle fights. I love the fact that they spliced old footage from A New Hope with Gold Leader.
Yes, that was one of Garth's favorite things. The director, when he was able to go into Skywalker Ranch and like dig into old school, unused, unseen footage of movies, and he was describing it was like a kid in a candy store to get to see all this stuff from. I mean, could you imagine being able to go and do that, and to know that you're creating something with this?
Crazy.
I mean, there's a lot of lines. Good lines that are from Gold Leader and Red Leader, and they just look awesome. It absolutely fits perfectly. You know that they're in the battle coming up soon, and I really like the leader of Blue Squadron, because originally Blue Squadron was actually, George had planned it, but I think it has to do with like the markings that the blue didn't work as well for the CGI they were doing in the 70s. So that's why they went with red and gold. So there's another Easter egg bringing Blue Squadron in, but it kind of gave you this new squad, and tactically it made perfect sense, right? Blue Squadron had U-wings and soldier support. That's why I think this scene is done really well tactically, like an actual battle. So as soon as they arrive, Blue Squadron, get to the ground, help support the fighters on the ground, because you know that it's a shield world, right? They have this gate, and the defense is to just close the gate, right? So the first thing that Admiral Rada says is get to the ground, get through that gate, and
only Blue Squadron goes.
Only Blue Squadron goes. But the thing I was going to say about the leader of Blue Squadron, you can tell he's a really good pilot, right? He's the leader of the squadron. He's got really good skill. He defends a few times. You see some cool shots of him, and then he ends up dying, right? What you don't see is him somehow in a 25-second clip linking 11, 12, 15 TIE fighter kills in a row in a 25-second clip. It doesn't seem unnaturally amazing.
You mean you're comparing him to Poe?
Yes, I'm comparing to Poe in The Force Awakens, when in a 25-second clip he puts together 10 or 15 kills of TIE fighters. But he leads his team, and you get the awesome scenes of the U-wings reinforcing the ground troops on the beach. I get chills in that scene when the U-wing lands and the guys get out for Jeddah. Like they weren't. I love that line because the rebellion had splintered at that point, right? The Saw Gerrera's faction on Jeddah was not part of the rebellion, but the frontline soldiers were probably, they probably knew each other from that group. They had friends in that group, so that was still something that they were fighting for, right? For the avenging what happened to Jeddah, and I love that scene.
What I loved about that, as you talk about the lead pilot, he was a general, and the first thing I thought is, that's a general in an X-wing. He's not on a bridge of a ship commanding what to do. He's in an X-wing. He's just like the Jedi, where they led by example. He's like, I might be a general, but I'm on the front lines in an X-wing with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really liked that moment where he's flying around and they're asking him for directions and they call him general. I just thought that was an interesting, like, the rebellion, the leaders in the rebellion is kind of the point. They lead by example, not just by,
They're
the
leaders, not
leaders
bosses.
just being, yeah, they're not bosses, they're leaders.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I think just like a quick shout out to the chat because people had been talking about the battles in this movie. Like, so Sendit O'Reilly said that even the ground battles felt more like real ground battles. And then Asparagus Daiquiri too was just talking about the movie in general, but said I watch Star Wars mostly for the space battles, and they have great looking ones in these movies. And he was talking about The Last Jedi and Rogue One. But yeah, so this movie it hits like so many amazing things. Like you said, the characters, the development, the actors, Felicity Jones, Forrest Whitaker. I do want to touch on that before we end later, but just the actors did amazing. But not only like the space battles, which were awesome, but then we get these ground battles, like because there's Attack of the Clones, right? We have some really cool ground battles, on Geonosis, and then on Kashyyyk too. There's some cool ground battles, but yeah, this one I think what like Sendit O'Reilly said is it felt real, like like super real. Like what Quinton said too is like, the leader,
tactics.
general, ace pilot dies. Like that's that's real. It's not like double kill, triple kill, kill-tacular. Like it was, he did his mission, but they were going up against incredible odds.
What I like too about this movie is, especially Rogue One, everyone that went with him pretty much knew that this was a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And even the pilots that went down in part of Blue Squadron, I'm pretty sure knew that in some way this was a suicide mission. There was no coming back. Even Bodhi was meant to stay on the ship to
I love that scene.
Keep it running so that they could get out, but
yeah,
at some point he realizes that they're not getting out of this. He needs to run that line so that they can send a message out that to the fleet above that all they need to do is destroy the shield gate so they can get the message out, so they can send the plans.
I was watching that scene. They talk about they need to find a master switch, right? Is what they keep saying. But it's not like there's this scene. It's not like you just tell him, okay, go find the master switch, and that's where he leaves it, right? There's a scene where the other guy goes to Bodhi, like, well, what does it look like? Describe it. They ask that question. We don't get the description from Bodhi. We don't need the description from Bodhi, but it gives us background as to how they know what they're looking for. It's not like Bodhi said, go find the master switch, and they went and found it. They gave us this description, or they asked for the description, and so you could tell there was reasoning for why they knew where to go. And then you get the AT-ATs. I like this idea behind them, because they're not the same AT-ATs you see like on Hoth, right?
Yeah,
they're cargo transports, and it makes sense because Scarif is not necessarily a military installation. It has defenses because it's it's Imperial, but it's not a military installation first and foremost. And I love there's when those things roll in, the ground force is like, oh no, this is really bad news for us. And that's when you get Blue Squadron rolling in. The X-Wings attack, and I do like that. One, these AT-ATs are weaker armored, but two, X-Wings have stronger weaponry than the snow speeders did.
Yeah,
so it makes
that's
sense
the first thing
that they're able to actually fight these things. Not that the armor is too strong for blasters. One, their armor is weaker, and two, these blasters are much more powerful in an X-Wing versus the snow speeders.
Yeah.
But then you also see the introduction. I remember the first time I saw the U-Wing, and I wasn't like, okay, this is. I was like, man, you just added another ship for who cares reason. But I think they did it really well. The U-Wing being almost
the U-Wing is cool.
The U-Wing is the Rebel Alliance's what they've scrapped together to be their LA-AT, their low altitude air transport. It's a transport to reinforce troops on the beach, but it's also a gunship platform. I love that scene where the guy's like hanging out the door on his It's
Where
the
he says
visual book describes
Terabas.
it as the book describes it as a heavy ion blaster. And
Oh
we
yeah,
know
where he
that
takes out the knee.
we know that ion is a technology that is damaging to circuits, electronics, ships and stuff like that. And so, it's got that blue look to it when it's coming out, and they're going in a circle around, kind of like the Snowspeeders did, but he's focusing fire on that AT-AT's knee, and it doesn't, like, it's weird because the way they chose to do the CGI on it, it's not like it explodes, right? It almost like shreds, like
it falls
wood
apart,
shredding.
and then the AT-AT falls.
Yeah, because the knee's gone. Of course, it's gonna fall, but it's not like an explosion. I mean, it does kind of explode, but it like shreds the metal, and it just looks really cool.
I like that is one of the things. It's like this movie is so good in these moments, and especially when like Bodhi realizes that this is it. This is the end game, but it's not just him. It's everyone. Everyone,
everyone gets that moment too, though. And it's I think
that one guy
perfect.
They need to get to the master switch. So one guy comes out of cover and instantly is shot. And Chirrut goes, okay, well, I'm one with the Force is with me, and he walks through. And this is the instance where I feel like the Force uses someone to get their will done, because he's able to walk and none of them can hit him. It's almost like the Force is just protecting him to be able to get that switch triggered, because as soon as he gets that done, he's shot a bunch. And that's where you get Baze crying after him, and that was a real touching scene when he's like, look into the Force and you'll always find me. And I just that movie, and then Baze goes, I'm one with the Force is with me, and then he marches to take down a few more Death Troopers, but then the one has the grenade in his hand. And you just knows that that's over, and it's like they made it so well where every character's death meant something. They were like, that wasn't it wasn't a side character that just died. You're like, no, they all and they all die.
Like Bodhi. I love Bodhi's character in this movie, and it's one of my favorite stories too, because the actor who played Bodhi was not an actor before this.
He is now.
He was just one of the fans of Star Wars that heard Star Wars was, asking for potential actors, and he threw together a tape and he sent it to him because he wanted to play in a Star Wars movie.
I'm pretty sure he's won an Oscar or an Emmy or something for his acting now.
I know, but not for this movie, but that's how we started, is just being a super fan of the series. It's I mean, that's the thing that I love, is just other people out there who have this kind of passion for Star Wars, who get to do these projects is just awesome. And he does such a good job with this like scared, he's kind of scared character. He feels bad for the things that he's done as the Empire, but he's told he can make it right.
Yeah, Galen says I can get right by myself.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I love that part, because we get, once again, I want to bring this up, but we get his hologram message, right, to Saw/Jin, and he kind of tells like his whole story, briefly of how he got to where he was and things like that. But then I feel like Bodhi's character gives that life, it gives that meaning, it gives what he said in that hologram message like legs, right, to be like, whoa, so he's not just there doing what he is, head down, like he's finding other people who also feel the same way as him. Like it can't just be Bodhi. He was probably talking to lots of people, trying to get them to see that the Empire's bad. And maybe there's possibly other people that worked within his installation that felt the same way as him, because he couldn't have done that by himself. He couldn't have, not only it, like in the building of it, made that weakness, but he had to have people to implement what he was saying, that they're all geniuses. All those people understand that could be a weakness. So there had to be other people who, at least to some extent, were on his side in there, which gives Galen's character such more meaning.
You know, interesting side point. The actor Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah. So
his brother is who does the voice in Rebels of Thrawn.
Oh, really?
His actual brother, Lars Mikkelsen, does the voice of Thrawn.
Yeah,
and so it's all funny. Just the family.
I always think of him in 007.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I remember when I first saw the trailers for this movie. I was like, oh, that's the bad guy from 007.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so the whole movie, when they you also get the teases when they're looking for all the drive for the plans.
Yeah.
And you get War Mantle, which is what we were talking about last week in the Bad Batch. Another one is Black Saber.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to be like flashbacks. Hyperspace tracking. I wonder if you'll get any like flashbacks in like The Mandalorian of, codename Black Saber, which is probably something to do with Moff Gideon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Moff Gideon in the Purge of Mandalore. If that was the code name that the Death Star gave the Purge of Mandalore, was Black Saber. Oh.
Yeah.
But
pretty cool.
The Purge would have happened before this, right?
Yeah, because it happened before or a little bit after Rebels, but it would have happened before Rogue One, I believe.
I know it happened after Rebels.
Yeah.
Which if you watch the trailer for Mando season 3, I didn't even notice this the first time I saw it, but you see that domed city in like shambles, like completely destroyed. It looks awesome.
But yeah, so this movie, so they get the plans out and they all die. And you kind of think like, okay, well, that's probably about the end of the movie. But then they start making the escape. You see all them jumping to hyperspace. And I love the part when Vader's Star Destroyer comes in and you just like know that Star Destroyer is different. It shows up, right. and because of the music is like sad but also terrifying. It's kind of it's a weird, especially the sad music when the Death Star enters the atmosphere and you can see it on the horizon and you can see how big the Death Star is. Again, I talked about scale earlier. When you see it on the horizon and Krennic just looks it straight in the face, knowing there's my aspirations and about to die, and but it's a weird somber music, but it's also kind of like terrifying, but it's also sad because all of the characters are dying, and so the music in this instance is so well written, and it's not even John Williams.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was gonna say. I think he did an amazing job, and like obviously tying in the John Williams throughout the movie. But no, I was just laughing when he said horizon because it reminded me of that. When he's like, "There's a problem with the horizon. There is no horizon.
There's no horizon." Yes. But so then Vader's. I like how Tarkin. He's like, Should we help with the fleet? He's like, nope, target the base on Scarif. Lord Vader will handle the fleet.
Yeah, and you don't even know at that point that Vader is coming in.
And then just a few minutes later, you see his ship arrive in his Star Destroyer, and you just know that Star Destroyer is different because you see ships crashing into it right before they're going to hyperspace, and then you get at that point, what every Star Wars fan had thought of when they think of Darth Vader. The terrifying, haunting scene, the hallway scene. And that scene is so chilling. because you also can feel like it's so cynical because he could like easily wipe them out, and it's almost like he's feeding off their fear and taking his time
Exactly.
killing them.
Just like Obi-Wan, the series, when
Yes.
people are talking about like how crazy that is, but exactly what you said, like the dark side fears off that, pain, suffering, fear, and he's playing with them. He doesn't have to even taking someone and holding him up against the wall and crushing
Yeah,
him
he's
against
holding
the
up against the
ceiling.
roof, and then he just slices them as he walks by.
Mm-hmm.
Or and then the other scene,
oh man.
the other scene, there's like 4 of them left, and he's like, "You guys are silly," and he just pulls all their weapons away. And he's like, "These aren't doing anything anyway, but now you really have no chance. Like I just pulled all your weapons out of your hands, and I'm just going to cut you down." And I like the sacrifice, and they realize they're not gonna make it, and so he hands them the card. And so then you see as they're running away, and the one that detaches them is Garth Edwards, the director of the movie. And I love that scene when they hand it to Leia, and they're like, "What have they brought us?" And she just says, "Hope." And that's
amazing.
and that's the movie. And that's the movie. And it's the end of the movie. You kind of thought they might expand on it, but it's like they brought us hope, and then boom, cut to black. That's the end of the movie.
I love that sound though, that the alarm blaring, which is the same alarm that starts off A New Hope when they come through. That's awesome. There were some more things I wanted to talk about in just the space battle going on overhead while this is happening. I felt like it was done really well, again, to the point of like strategically you can hear the different people calling out different orders, right? And every time I hear either Gold Leader or Red Leader talk, it just gave me chills. I remember the first time watching the movie, like that was actually them, right? Just things that were shot in the late 70s, 76. The movie came out in 77, so it was probably shot in like 76, maybe 77. But then cut from the film, right? But they had those things shot. Lines like, he's like, we're gonna start our attack run on the shield gate, and then Gold Leader goes, keep it tight and watch out for those towers. That was filmed for A New Hope. I mean, there's lines, they talk about the towers all the time in that. But then there's defense towers on the shield gate firing back at them.
I thought about that moment when I was watching the movie because he says that, but the next scene they show is the towers on the shield gate,
straight shooting at them.
So it doesn't feel out of place because like that's the next shot.
Yeah, because it's like he's like, okay, I have these lines I have to work with, right? So he puts that line there, keep it tight and watch out for those towers, and then right then they're making a dive into the shield gate, and there's towers on it firing back at them. And then you get the scene of Red Leader. Red Leader says, "Stick close, Red 5. Where are you going?"
Yes.
Which was cut. That didn't happen. But then you see Red 5 getting destroyed. Oh, there's an opening. They got an open position for Red 5 for the the next 20 minutes. But and then there's a line where Gold Leader just yells, just says, "Hit that opening," and then a whole group of Y-wings, yes sir, and they go in and they ion torpedo this Death Star because Red Squad probably cleared out the TIE Fighter, gave them a clear path for the Y-wings to go in and ion bomb the Death Star or the Star Destroyer. And it's just like the tactics, like the leader's taking lead, and it's almost like they had these sound footages, right, or these sound clips, but they were really good strategic like leadership sound clips that just played really well into again the tactics of this space battle, of the leaders making calls, seeing things going on the battlefield. Hit that opening that we just made for you, and then the Easter egg of all Easter eggs. With Admiral Raddus is like, get me a Hammerhead Corvette.
Yes.
The Easter egg of all Easter eggs. I was crying when this part came on screen because at this point we'd gotten them in Rebels already, hadn't we?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure we did. We had gotten them in Rebels. I'm pretty sure we did. And even that was a huge Easter egg. You know, these ancient cargo ships from an ancient era, and because the Hammerhead Corvette is the very first ship that you start out on in Knights of the Republic. So this is a 4,000-year-old ship design, basically.
Yeah.
and you're as a fan, I remember seeing it. I was like, oh, that was cool. And then here we get to see it in live action. Like, that was so awesome.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I've read that crew that went down with the Shield Gate also perished, and like that was them again doing something that needed to be done to get these plans out. Like every death was like perfect and meaningful in these last few minutes of sacrifice. And I love this idea of a Star Destroyer that's disabled, right? It doesn't have any end, it doesn't have any power. Everything's completely disabled. Now, that's what Ion does. You see that the Ion cannon in Hoth, right? And so, do you guys hear a loud buzzing sound?
Yeah, it's coming. It's from Josiah.
Is it mine? Yeah, let me see.
Is somebody mowing the lawn there? But you think about it, it's a Star Destroyer just floating in space, right? So obviously this Corvette, which has massive engines on it, right, has like those 4 massive engines on the back of it, being able to push an object in space, right? Because an object in space is just floating. It's weightless, basically. It has mass, so it takes force to move it, but it's like weightless in a way, able to push it straight into the other one and then down into the shield gate, and that's how they get the shield gate open. Was just awesome.
Yeah,
I thought that was, I mean, just seeing that Hammerhead Corvette was just massive Easter egg goosebumps for us Knights of the Republic fans.
So yeah, I think that this movie has just this was the perfect time to rewatch this movie, because now I'm super excited for Andor and to get more on this this character and some of these other characters. I'm just so excited now for Andor. We only have to wait till Wednesday. We're getting 3 episodes. I've heard that they're a little closer to 30 minutes, so it's only about a little over 90 minutes.
I've seen the runtime for the first 3 movies. It's for the first 8 episodes, 39 minutes for the first one, 35 minutes for the second one, 40 minutes for the third one.
So it's barely
it's like an hour and 50 minutes long. It's almost 2 hours for the first 3 episodes. That's a feature length film right there. Because they've released the first 4 episodes to like critics. I watched like a short clip of, I think it was Eckhart Slatter got access to it, and I didn't want to watch a lot because I didn't want spoilers. But he was saying it's really good, and I'm like, oh man, I am so excited for this. But I was just thinking another kind of theme in this film. At the very beginning, Jin's mom tells Krennic, "You'll never win," right? And then Galen, when they're on Edo, says, "You'll never win," and then at the end, Jin doesn't say "You'll never win," just tells him, "You've lost." And that's an awesome, like, every member of the family goes from "You'll never win" to "You've lost." This is it. We've done it. We've beaten you. Our family has beaten you.
Yeah, Kaloni said I almost spoiled it because after watching the movie last night, I almost watched the 9-minute special on Andor. I was like, oh, I kind of want to watch it now, and she's like, no, don't spoil it.
I do think that's more behind the scenes. It's not like
I watched like the first 20 seconds, and then she's like, no, I don't want to watch this, and so I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's almost like, I'd say as much of advertisement for the show, or it's also like, it's almost like a 9-minute trailer of their, behind the scenes they do for all their TV shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've covered quite a bit. There's so much to talk about in this movie, and This movie is so good. You can see it when Quentin
You know what
actually
else
likes
we
a Star
get?
Wars movie. He really,
You know what else we get in this film that is awesome? You get that.
yeah,
Warwick Davis, another cameo. I love it.
Mhm.
I love that
Yeah.
he's still so passionate. Like he was one of those. He was a kid who got to be an Ewok because he fit the description of an Ewok, and it's been a passion
Yeah.
of his ever since. And it's awesome to see him still have that passion. 30, 40 years later, still being involved in and enjoying this universe with us.
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. I can't.
I just have to say one time, I just didn't want to jump back in the middle of we were talking about everything else, but so the scene that we get with Jen and Saw Gerrera,
Mhm.
like that was such an amazing moment. We've been talking about like how this movie is so much about characters and the emotion and the relationships. It was such an amazing thing because you know you you get them the beginning story, right? But then you don't get the story until that moment about when she's 16. And so
Mhm.
from the moment she's 16 up until current, she felt like he that Saw abandoned her, right? But his viewpoint on the whole thing is that he was saving her,
Yes.
and so you get this like deep emotion and stuff like that. And I love the part where so they're having this like super close deep conversation, and they're starting to like finally understand each other after years, right? And they're kind of getting on the same page. But then I love that moment when Saw mistakes the whole situation, and you can just see like his heart break. Like, man, Forrest Whitaker in this moment is just like top notch acting. He's like,
Right.
wait, like, were you sent to kill me? And like he's just like
Mhm.
right there on screen, 100% emotions just bared, like after everything, like feels like she's his daughter, right? And he's like, were you coming here to kill me? And like, oh man, it just still gives me goosebumps even just thinking about it. It's just such an amazing moment there, and like shows the feelings that he had for her, and once again made his death in this movie so much more epic as well.
Oh, and
I
how
love.
iconic is that saying? Save the rebellion, save the dream. As
Like
she's
that.
Hmm.
running away.
It's his dream.
Hmm.
That's what he's telling you. Is save my dream of a free society. Of that was
Yeah.
his whole point, was to free Onderon from the separatist control.
I was gonna
And
say we have seen Saw Gerrera fighting for a long time, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, he does not get to see the fruits of his labor in the end.
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, I do. I love that line. Save the rebellion, save the dream. It's
Hmm.
it's so good. And this movie is it's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I
And I think once
remember.
again, like how we had talked about Hooray, right? But in this, like Jen is like she does some amazing things, and she goes on these missions, and she does some cool stuff and everything. But I love once again here that it's all explained. Saw straight up says when like she was like I was 16 years old, and he was like you were like my best resistant, you were like one of the best resistant fighters. So right there
Mhm.
it totally explains every skill that she has throughout the rest of the movie. She was a resistance fighter and one of the best,
From
so we
6 years
didn't
old,
have to
trained
see
by.
her training. Yeah, and by Saw
By Saw
Gerrera, right?
Gerrera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember after this movie came out, and I love this movie, we got the poster for the fourth season of Rebels, and it had
Mm.
the main character zoomed away, and behind them, real big, was Saw Gerrera, and at the top it said "Save the Rebellion, Save the Dream." I remember that got
Oh
me so
man.
excited for season 4 of Rebels.
Hmm.
Just that poster, like, oh, more Saw Gerrera, and we've
Hmm.
seen a lot of him now between his character in Rebels, which is more closely his character here, and
Yeah.
his character in the Clone Wars, and now the Bad Batch, more of him in the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
And the Bad Batch,
and
he's
and
in
Jedi
Rebels,
Fallen
he's
Order.
like and Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
But I feel like in the Clone Wars, he's learning who he is to be. He's just trying to fight the bad guys, right? And he suffers that huge loss. And then in the Bad Batch, you see him as a leader. He is a leader in the Bad Batch, right? He's not just a fighter anymore. He's become a leader. And I feel like you mentioned, Forrest Whitaker did a really good job playing this character. And I feel like, because it's confirmed that it's Forrest Whitaker, right? In the Andor show, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
he's in it.
Yeah,
and I'm excited to see more of
He
him
also did the
playing
voice.
Saw Gerrera.
He also took over the voice for him, I think, in both Jedi Fallen Order and Rebels.
Yeah, but I'm just excited to see him act as this character again, right?
I know.
Maybe a little bit pre his injuries.
Oh even. Man, that's what I was gonna say. Thanks for just reminding me.
Who makes us look so menacing? Just taking a breath of air.
Yeah, I know. It's so good, so good. But you just reminded me. So what I also wanted to mention was, so we're getting Andor. We know Forrest Whitaker's in it. So in the moment when they're basically escaping, Cassian Andor comes, gets Jen, grabs her by the hand, and they start fleeing. He stays, right? But did you guys notice that like 2.5 second stare off between Saw Gerrera and Cassian Andor? Like I love it because they didn't even say a word, but there was so much in that. And that's beautiful because of the show. They can go anywhere they want with that. They could have never met. They could have almost met, or they could have had like a crazy story arc before this. And so the way they were looking at each other, I guarantee you, after we watch this show, that moment is gonna be epic. I guarantee it.
Yes.
Yeah, because you could see there was something there.
Yes.
It's obvious that that he knows who Saw Gerrera is, but it's equally as obvious that Saw knows that this is Cassian Andor here in this moment.
Yeah.
And he tells him, and he tells Jin, go with him.
Yes.
And I love his almost like defiance of, I'm going to take off all my breathing apparatus and all that as a last sign of defiance to the Emperor, to the Empire.
Well, it's not just a stare down either. Saw has his shaft and he goes into like defense fight mode, and Andor has his hand on his gun as he approaches Jin. I'm just watching it right now to kind of confirm, but he's on his gun like very slowly, watching what he's doing as he approaches Jin. So there's something there that they both know they potentially are both a threat.
Oh man, I just and so think about this again. So this was in 2016, right? And so since this movie came out, all of those things we talked about, like the black saber and all these things are coming up in current released Star Wars. Like, oh man, like I feel like this was such an amazing movie because they're taking pieces and putting it right now, and so I guarantee you there's going to be lots of things pulled out of this movie once again. And that's what Disney has been doing amazingly so I can't wait to see how this gives even more meaning to the relationship, or possibly no relationship at all though, of Forrest Whitaker and Cassian Andor.
This movie, I feel like, set up a lot of what is successful in Star Wars today, because obviously there was a lot of controversy in Star Wars at this time between, as bad of
this is more before it really started to get controversial.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, this was really, I felt like this showed that there is definitely passionate people who can make successful Star Wars. I don't really remember hearing anything negative about this movie, right? There was no, this was bad, or they didn't, how does this person know this without any kind of background? But I felt like this movie, for being a 2-hour movie, showed you Jin, Cassian, K2SO, Chirrut, Baze, Bodhi, Rook, all of these characters. We got all the information we needed to like them, feel bad, but like honored when they met their demise, but also like understand enough of all of their backgrounds that you understood where each person was coming from and had their abilities that they needed to have.
Yeah.
In a 2-hour movie.
So
we got enough background We felt bad for every character that died, and it's just awesome. It's really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And this is kind of before how you talked about it. It was more before the controversy. Most people, when The Force Awakens came out, there was a little bit of complaint about it being a retread of A New Hope. But other than that, there wasn't. It was mostly liked. This movie, everyone liked it. And it wasn't really until The Last Jedi, which to me, it just doesn't even make sense when at this point, after the discussions we've had, why anyone would get upset at that movie. But
Okay, yeah, let's go.
Moving on.
All right, so,
But
so for
anyway,
those who aren't
yeah.
watching the podcast, what was so funny?
Oh, just the pause of before all the complaints about The Last Jedi. But anyway, yeah, this was before that, and so I think a lot of people love this movie. I love this movie. We all love this movie. Whether you liked The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker, all Star Wars fans love this movie. And it's so good, and I can't, like we've talked about it a number of times, but can't wait to see it being expanded upon. I like how they built a movie expanding upon a movie, and now they're going to build a show expanding upon a movie that expanded upon a movie.
Yeah, that's true. And like, we're here for it.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you talk about people who either dislike this about Star Wars, or people who dislike the prequels, people who dislike the sequels. Almost everybody liked this movie, and it kind of reminds me of a coworker I have who's an older gentleman, a huge fan of the original trilogy when he was a kid. Doesn't much care for the prequels, doesn't much care for the sequels. Okay, dislikes the sequels, but loves this movie and is super excited for the Andor show.
See,
and
this is why.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of why they're betting so big on Andor, because this movie did so well, and they're trying to draw back every Star Wars fan, right? Every Star Wars fan came together and loved this movie. It wasn't the most successful box office wise, but it wasn't designed to be either. It was a Star Wars story. It wasn't one of the major trilogy movies, but they're trying to build upon this. Everybody, because this is like, when you talk to your friends we talk to people who don't love Star Wars. You talk about how good the prequels are or how bad the sequels are, but everybody has told their friend that they like Rogue One, and now we're getting the TV show around it, and that's why I'm really hoping that Andor does good. I'm not talking like you or I liking it, because you or I like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Even I who isn't the one who touts his love for the prequels or the sequels, watches them from time to time. Like we're gonna like it. I'm hoping that it's the average person who help we get massive viewership numbers from this, and
we kind of touched on it.
It really pushes Disney into, okay, maybe we shouldn't be putting a pause on Rogue Squadron or Taika Waititi's movie or Rian Johnson's new trilogy or whatever. Because I've heard he's still working on some project.
I really hope
I'm hoping that they can really just okay, we're kind of back in the groove of things, right? Like Mandalorian's done well, Boba Fett did okay, and we're gonna get back into the spending big money. They spent big money on Andor because they didn't use the volume; they used practical sets. And they spent big money on this project.
This is why I don't get when everyone says that everything that Disney has made with Star Wars has just been crap. Because this movie is amazing. That means you're telling me you don't like this movie, you don't like The Mandalorian.
And that's a joke. I don't care who you are. If you say you don't like The Mandalorian, it's a lie.
Right?
If you say you don't like The Mandalorian, you cannot say you are a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
You can tell me, if you say you don't like the Mandalorian, you can tell me that you like the original trilogy. That's okay. You can like those movies, but you're not a Star Wars fan if you don't like the Mandalorian.
But that's
if you don't like Grogu, we cannot be friends.
There's so much good for all you can complain about with the sequel trilogies, they've made good. Rogue One is an amazing movie. They've made good projects. Rebels was all Disney. Yeah. Yes, it was made by Dave Filoni, but it's still Disney. It was still all once Disney took over. So there are so many projects that have been so good under Disney. So it just doesn't make sense to me that saying that everything that's been made since Disney taken over is not good, because there are clearly lots of examples that are great.
Yeah. And I like, since there's been some more news about Acolyte, I don't know if you guys seen, like, it's been coming more up in like casting and leaks and things like that. But what I was going to say is what we wanted for the Acolyte, I feel like is going to come true, because what we saw in the Obi-Wan series, we wanted like the Acolyte to be like mysterious, like dark, and like we were worried like that if Disney could do that, or if they would do that. But even just talking about Rogue One way back in 2016, but then we also now have the Obi-Wan series with that's focusing on not only just Vader, but also like the Inquisitors. So we're getting like that. And then now with Andor, from like first impressions, it appears it's gonna be dark, right? So if we start getting that way, by the time we get to Acolyte, if they're kind of warming people up to this, oh man, I'm excited.
The biggest thing that I've seen on like everyone's initial reactions and talking about how dark it is, everyone is saying, oh my goodness, there's a curse word in Star Wars in the new Andor show.
There was a curse word in Empire Strikes Back, when Han tells the guy to go to hell, or I'll see you in hell.
Yeah, you can debate whether hell's a curse word or not, but
what about scruffy looking Nerf herder?
Yeah, come on. Carabas? The curse all the time in Rebels. Chopper's screaming profanity the whole time. He has to be. You know he is. And Luke tells
Voodoo.
And Luke tells R2 to watch his language when he's on the holy island there at
Sacred Island, buddy. Watch the language.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, this is gonna be exciting, and to everyone that's listening, we're gonna be basically from now until the end of the show, our show is gonna be covering the latest week's episode. And
we're gonna have a lot to go over
next week.
It's gonna be a long podcast. I can feel it.
You're gonna, because he's gonna have 3 episodes off the bat, and so.
I mean, think about it. We spent 2 hours talking about a 40-minute Obi-Wan show every week.
That's true.
So yeah, we're gonna just each podcast will just be our discussion of the latest week's episode of Andor.
Well, we're gonna have to find a time to fit in Tales
until
of the Jedi.
Bad
We're gonna want to talk about Tales of the Jedi to each other when that comes out. Like,
because it's gonna come out in about the middle of this show.
Jedi.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
oh man, I'm so excited for that.
We're focused. I'm so excited for Tales of the Jedi being a show that half focuses on one of our favorite characters, one of Josiah's absolute favorite characters, being Ahsoka, and another character we all respect and really want to know more about in Dooku. Like, we all have that yearning to learn more about pre-dark side Dooku.
Because even as a Sith, he's like a gentleman.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of that is in the acting.
Yes.
But that is what acting is what brings the character to life, right? And even if they go to a younger version, we can still get that in him. And I mean, we all love that the Dooku Jedi Lost book, and that gives a little bit of pre dark side Dooku, and we all want to see more. So I think I'm just super excited for all of that in Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a Star Wars fan.
Oh yeah, right now it's a really good time.
If you just think about like Dooku for a second, right? He was one of Yoda's star pupils. Yoda, out of all the people, saw him, and Yoda could have had the pick of any like youngling to be a Padawan. He chooses him out of everyone. So right there, that's just an epic beginning to his story, And then the next thing is having Qui-Gon Jinn, one of Star Wars fans' favorite characters, as well as then his Padawan. And then we see his, story later too. So that's epic. And then you find out that, he's basically like a ruling family. Like that's where he comes from. Just everything of his whole story is so amazing.
That's the part that I always keep. I keep saying I'm excited to see young Dooku as a Jedi, but we also get to see him training Qui-Gon Jinn as a Padawan.
Oh man,
that's gonna be awesome.
So great.
And the way that they've become so much better at Lucasfilm with the animation. Like I'm not even like it's a cartoon. Yeah, but I'm so excited.
Yeah, big time.
They've done so good with the facial expressions and you can really feel a character how they're feeling, almost like it's a person acting, and it's just I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, there's so much we talked about I think last week, and I think it's basically been made official that Bad Batch is moving to the very beginning of January. And so
I think we're going to get 2-episode premiere there with 16 episodes total in the season.
So, and then you're also so I think Andor is going to last until November sometime. I'm not sure what the date is, but it's going to be into November. So there's not going to be much of a break in between constant Star Wars content.
And that's what we like to hear.
Yeah. Bad Batch into Ahsoka, into I'm going to get Visions in there somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a good place. We're all super excited for Andor. We'll be covering that next week. We'll take deep dives and on all of that, and we'll just really dig into Andor as a character. I'm really excited to flesh out his character, to see the kind of character that makes the decisions that he does in Rogue One, and that is very interesting. And I think we're gonna get a lot more on that. I think we can go ahead, guys. If before we leave, if you liked what you heard, go ahead and join our Discord. We continue to have conversations over there. If you want to support us, you can support us on Patreon. And so Josiah, what do you got going on?
Not too much. As far as new content going for Hezekiah's Toys and Games right now, I'm actually away I'm working away from home, so I'm a big part of the filming and not very well editing
He's
of
the
it.
cameraman.
So yeah. So we don't got a bunch going on there, but definitely we got more stuff coming up on there. But if you go sub and support him, we're always gonna be doing like giveaways and things like that. And yeah, it's fun. But anyways, yeah, so definitely support him. Links in the show notes. Also, you can find it in Discord. Me, I'm always in Twitter, in different Discords about technology, Star Wars, and gaming stuff
giveaways.
Like that. Giveaways, yeah. If you want to enter cool giveaways, follow me on Twitter, because I'm usually entering different giveaways on there. So you can tag team with me, and we can enter some giveaways and win some cool stuff. Quinton did that. And he won the mic that he's using right now. So
it was the camera actually.
It was the camera. That's right.
Yeah, it was the camera. So I was like, all right, okay, now I got a piece. Now I got to buy the rest. I'm going to start this podcast up.
Yeah.
Josiah's retweeting of giveaways.
Yep. So there you go. But anyways, I just wanted to take a second. As always, huge thanks to everybody watching live and in the chat with us. That keeps it lively. We love having conversations with people in the chat. So editor, thanks for supporting us. We've seen you on lots of different of our live shows. So we thank you for being here. Asparagus Daiquiri and Send It O'Reilly, Kaloni, Yeah, thanks everybody who's live in the chat with us. It keeps it fun for us and interactive. And everybody who's going to be listening to this or watching it later, thank you so much for listening to us talk about our love and passion for Star Wars. Because yeah, it's all about love for Star Wars. Doesn't matter what's your favorite Star Wars, your favorite character. You're welcome here, and we love to hear from you.
That's
Just wanted
that's good.
do a big shout out to our one Patreon subscriber, Togo Bap. He was unfortunately not with us at all live this week. I hope he enjoys the Easter egg that I gave in our podcast for him earlier.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
guys.
big
Well,
shout out to Bruce. Yeah, thanks, Bruce.
all right. Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you to everyone who watched. And as always,
May the force be with you.
May the force be with you.
always.
Always.